Venezuela has terrible utilities, lackluster water service, it's a tax haven, and Port La Mar in Margarita Island is a tomb. Well, today I'm reacting to my good friend Bow Tie Globe. He recently came to Venezuela, spent a couple times, and I'm reacting to his takes to the country and, of course, his experience regarding his staying in the country. So let's start.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
Recently, my good friend Bow Tie Globe, he is a good Twitter buddy. Probably you already heard about him. In case you haven't, he is a very smart man, very wise man. He works on these offshore issues like second residencies, second passports, tax bases, tax strategies, and so on. So recently he spent a couple of months in the country, mostly in Margarita Island, but he also visited Caracas and my hometown Lecheria, and he had some very interesting takes regarding the country, of course, according to his point of view. First, he posted on Twitter, X, I'm gonna put it right here with what he tweeted, and he mentions that Venezuela, regarding his expectations, what people think abroad, especially Western citizens, compared to the reality. First, he starts by mentioning that nature is just as good, which I agree. Of course, Venezuela is a beautiful country that has a lot of biodiversity, beautiful beaches, beautiful mountains. The cities are cool because this is a mix between development, buildings, and so on, but also with a bunch of, nature, trees, mountains, beaches, and so on. So right now, so far so good. Venezuela, regarding nature, is just as good, probably better, depending on your expectations. So if you are an enthusiastic regarding this ecotourism and so on, and you want to see very, very particularly beautiful landscapes, Venezuela, you're gonna love to visit Venezuela. Then he mentions prices in Venezuela. They are worse as what people think. And this is, I agree, because here's the deal about the prices in Venezuela. Many people think, and most Westerns have this mindset, this mentality, that Venezuela, since suffers a very dreadful economic crisis on the past decade, Venezuela should be a quote-unquote cheap country. And it's not the case. This is something that I already beat this dead horse a bunch of times. I'm going to explain yet again. Venezuela has never been a cheap country. Remember, first, it's an oil country. Also, since we had this dreadful crisis, it was awful, one of the worst human crisis, economic crisis in the world without a war, it was tough. What we saw, so that's why we saw a bunch of this dreadful news on, mainstream media and also the diaspora, over 7 million people. However, Venezuela is not as cheap as you might think. And also, I have to add that it's not also as draconian expensive as you might think. This is not Switzerland or Hong Kong or Singapore or Vancouver, or places like that, or Monte Carlo. It's not prohibitive expensive, but it's gonna be most likely more expensive than you might think. Now, it's not prohibitive expensive if you have a budget and you know how to make, and you're flexible, you can get a great experience at a fraction of the price. Also, regarding prices, I have to add that depends on your lifestyle and also depends which side of the CPI, of the Consumer Price Index, are you weighting your particular, budget expectations. Eating on a nice restaurant is expensive. It's not dreadful expensive, and it's like $20 per person or something. Can be cheaper if you look around, but if you want to pay convenience, and that's the main key about the prices in Venezuela. If you want convenience, it's gonna cost a premium. And if you want high middle class Western amenities in the country, it's also gonna take a premium. Now, when you reach the high-end sector, it's going to be a fraction compared to Western nations and even some Latin American nations. Also mentions safety. Safety is better compared to what most Westerns think, and 100% agree. I discussed this issue with data a bunch of times, even recently, and Venezuela is actually very, very safe compared to what most people think. It's on average with Latin America, and the trend has been growing regarding safety. Venezuela is like 3 or 4 times more safe than it used to be just a decade ago. If you know what you're doing, you stay in a nice area, you have a good network, and so on and so on, you are not going to have an issue regarding safety. I will say right now, Colombia could be less safe, way less safe than Venezuela, at least on the capitals and major cities. Same thing with Mexico. So if you know what you're doing, Venezuela is going to be very, very safe. And also you have to add the plus that since we don't have as much Western tourists compared to, let's say, Colombia and Mexico, you're not a mark. There is not an industry, criminal industry, that is going to try to take advantage of your situation. So on that particular regard, Venezuela is very safe for Western citizens. So know what you're doing, stay in decent areas, and you're going to be pretty much fine. And that doesn't mean that the less safe areas, you're going to get robbed or killed or something like that. Of course, you know how safety works. But still, it's not going to be a draconian scenario. So if you want to come to the country for a few days, you're going to be pretty much safe. Now, this is a funny thing. He mentions corruption in the country is worse that most people think abroad. Well, the perception of corruption in, on the West, outside Venezuela, is pretty bad. So I will say it's, accurate. One of the things is accurate compared to the rest of the world. Yes, there is a lot of corruption in Venezuela. One of the reasons why the economy collapsed 80% GDP last decade, mostly on the oil industry. However, corruption works differently than most countries because the people that engage in corruption activities, they are doing it throughout the oil industry or some related issue. It's not this strict corruption that you see in other places in Latin America, like Mexico and Colombia. Beautiful places, I have to say, but it's not like the police officer is gonna take a bribe and every time they pull you over or something like that. It works differently. It's not worse than most people think. I will say it's equally worse. Other thing that he mentions are the roads in the country, and he says they are better than most people think. Well, this is something that I don't agree as much. Actually, I think they are bad. On my perception, the roads in Venezuela are bad. However, I have higher expectations for the infrastructure of my own country. However, something that we had in Venezuela is that on the 20th century, meanwhile, Venezuela was one of the most developed nations, not only in Latin America, but in the world. It was top 5 GDP per capita in the 50s, top 10 GDP per capita in the 70s and the 80s. And on those particular times, the governments, the past governments back then, they took care, actually, the infrastructure issues. They developed miles and miles on kilometers, as you want to use, of roads and infrastructure and bridges and so on. Now the issue today is that the country regarding roads and highways and so on is very well connected compared to the rest of Latin America. The issue is the maintenance of these particular roads. So they are not top notch right now. However, there is a program right now, the past couple of years, where right now we are charging fees for using the highways. It's a small fee, cents of US dollars. And right now the roads are a little bit better than it's supposed to be. They are better compared to 5 or 6 years ago, but still a long way to go. But I will say that for a Latin American country, Venezuela is well connected by roads and so on. Afterwards, Globe mentions utilities. The utilities are worse than most people think, and I disagree. And here's why. Regarding return on investment, Venezuela has actually decent utilities. We have some blackouts every now and then, but if you analyze and you have an electricity bill of $5, $10. It's higher for big businesses and industries and so on, but for residential or for a small office, you pay like $5, $10, or $20 per month, something of that nature. I mean, that's probably one of the cheapest electricity bills in the world, and you get a blackout of a couple hours per month, or 2 or 3 per month. Some cases you don't have a blackout in the whole month. Of course, that depends on the city. Caracas and Lecherias are going to have a better electricity supply. So if you ask me, that's a bargain. It's better than paying $100, $200, $300 per month in other places in the world, even in Latin America, that you're still going to have a couple of blackouts every now and then. And so if you ask me, the ROI regarding electricity is good. I believe most people in the world prefer to pay $10, $20 per month instead of paying $100 and $200 per month, but with the nuances of a couple of blackouts every now and then. Okay. Now, also the water service is not as great. Depends on the area, depends on the city, depends on the state. You pay next to nothing in order to have water supply. Afterwards, you have the HOA fees that, please, in Venezuela, they are a necessary evil. Pay your HOA fees. It's like $20, $50, depending on $100 in the more upscale area. And they take care of garbage and maintenance of the surrounding area and so on. So I believe it's a good deal as well. And also we have internet connection that was one of the worst things about Venezuela. Some people migrated just because of the internet connection. It's bad, but it has improved a lot on the past 3 years or so. Now you have a direct optic fiber, and you can arrange the services that cost between $20 and $50, $100 if you need super max mega internet, if you're a hacker or something like you're hacking the Pentagon or something like that. But it gets you good value. The internet connection, you can have between 25, 30 MBs to 100 and even 500 MBs, depending on the area, the service, and so on. So I believe that the public services, the utilities, are lackluster. They're not excellent, but gives you a great ROI. And also, he mentions taxes. Taxes are better compared to most people think. And actually, I agree with this 100%. But you have to take it with a grain of salt. And also, he made his own explanation on his own Twitter X account. You have to take it in 2 ways. First, you have the personal income tax, and also, let's say, the offshore tax when you make money by the internet or passive income abroad, something like that. On that particular case, taxes are low, are zero. Of course, you should hire an accountant and so on, but taxes are very, very low on that particular regard, and also there are tax exemptions and so on. But it's not a deal breaker, Venezuela, regarding taxes on that particular regard. Now, the heavy thing about taxes is where the brick and mortar taxes, I'm talking physical, traditional businesses here in the country, taxes are draconian. The tax rate and the tax burden in Venezuela are low. However, you have to make a bunch of small contributions, and the structure, I mean, it's not the quantity of the bill, of the tax bill. It's going to be all of the nuances that you have to make in order to pay such taxes. You have to pay a bunch of small contributions. Also the big ones like the CENIAT is the local taxman, and also with the regional taxes that are a pain on the rear end to deal with. But still, the local entrepreneurs have their structures, have better profit margins if they know how to manage their own taxes. And believe me, there are a bunch of people in the country that can manage the taxes efficiently. So taxes are not a deal breaker in Venezuela, and I give a shout out to BTG for pointing that out. Regarding Margarita, Bowtie Globe had some interesting takes. I have to remind you that that was the place that he spent most of his time in the country. And first, he tweets about it and says, the photographs that you see on social media are true. Agree 100%. The beaches are gorgeous. And yes, they are. However, Margarita doesn't have the best beaches in the country. There are way better beaches. Now, they're not worse. They are beautiful. And also, since it's a big island and also has a couple of islands nearby, you have like 100 beaches to choose. So you can spend an entire year just visiting every beach and figuring out which is your favorite beach in Margarita Island. So that's a fun errand to be in charge. Now he mentions the pros and cons about Margarita Island. The pros, let's mention it. The weather is sunny almost the entire year. And yes, Margarita is, is warm, it's summer all year round. I mentioned this a couple times, and also Altai Globe is mentioning as well, very savvy man. And yes, and if you like summer, Margarita Island is, of course, is your place to be. You have a dry season on the entire country, most of the country, and a rainy season. So it's half and half. And the rainy season, when it rains, it's just a couple of hours per day. So it's not a deal breaker. It's not like London or something like that. It's going to rain every day, the whole day, something like that. So if you like summer, believe me, Margarita Island is going to be awesome. Also, Botai Globe mentions that the beaches, there is variety regarding the beaches. You have beaches with a lot of waves for surfers and so on, and also the calm ones. And that's entirely true. And actually the same road for the beach with the most waves and one of the calmer ones is on the same road, and there is a wide road that you have to take. So you can go to the very big waves beach, and you can go on the same road, you can go with a very calm one. So very good for Botai Globe to pointing that out. Also mentions regarding the utilities, stable electricity with the water service. I don't remember what he says. He mentions that water service is good, and also fast internet in Pampatar. Well, on that particular regard, the electricity, stable electricity, is not as stable compared to a handful of places in Venezuela, like the east side of Caracas or Lecheria or the city where I am right now. But Margarita is on the short list with most stable electricity supply. Depends on the area on the island as well, by the way. Also, he mentioned the water service. The water service in Margarita is lackluster, always has been lackluster, it's not for the Christ. Most of the properties in the island have their own water tank in the facilities, and also the residential complexes have their own big water tank. Regarding the water service, it's not a deal breaker. Either if you stay on a decent location, a decent complex, or on a hotel or an Airbnb, whatever might be the case, they have everything covered out. Just have you're gonna have mostly a water tank in your apartment or your Airbnb, and if you stay on a nice area, believe it, is taken care of. Just do your due diligence before arrive to the island. And lastly, he mentions that it's quite safe. Well, the island is relatively safe. I mean, it's way safer than Westerns that have never been in the country think. It's going to be safer. However, it's not the safest place in Venezuela. Like, there are 3 or 4 places in Venezuela that are way are super 100% safe, 99% safe, let's say. So, but you stay in a nice area, you go to the touristic areas and so, and you can explore besides that, and you should be fine. Just, take some basic precautions, and you're not going to have an issue regarding safety. Now, let's go with the cons of Margarita Island. The first one is that things are spread out. Yes, the island is big, it's huge, and there are a lot of things and a lot of places. Margarita Island has 11 municipalities. Imagine that. Pampatar is one of the cities, probably one of the 2 main cities in the island. Is walkable, certain areas, but it still need ride-sharing services in order to go to the malls and so on. So on this particular regard, I agree. Now, something about Margarita is very fun. I like to drive, like to take my own car over there to Margarita Island. I like to drive to the whole island. It's fun to drive over there. And for me, is one of the experiences that I like about the island. Margarita is not going to be like New York or a European capital where you have a subway and you can walk to every place and so on. That's not going to be the case. If you want walkability, you live just walking around to every place on the island. No, that's not going to happen. This is a funny thing. Port La Mar is a dump, and you shouldn't go there. Well, here's where I disagree. Port La Mar is the first of the second most important city within Margarita Island. within the state, nueva parte state. And the center of Por la Mar is a dump. I mean, it's less developed. It's old. It has been already seen their better days. It's not. It's a little bit less developed right now. So it's not. But it's the center. The Por la Mar is huge. It's the biggest city over there regarding population. But actually, the nicer parts. There are a bunch of nicer parts in nice areas within Por la Mar. Actually, I like to stay in Por la Mar rather than Pampatar, but I know where to stay. And also a bunch of amenities in Por la Mar. So take this opinion with a grain of salt, because it's not the case. Por la Mar has both dumpy areas and also nice areas. Now, he mentions that he likes Pampatar better than Por la Mar, and I don't think it's a gray area. This is something that I disagree with Botai Globe, because Por la Mar has nice areas and areas that are dumb, to be honest. Same thing with Pampatar. Pampatar has nice areas and less developed areas, some rural areas where fishermen live. Also, you have very upscale areas regarding within Pampatar and nice restaurants and so on. So please take this particular statement by Botai Globe with a grain of salt. There are both nice and crappy areas in each side of the island. The water service is filled with a tank. And this is, it's true, the water service is lackluster. Just do your own due diligence regarding the hotel, the Airbnb, and so on. You're going to stay, and you're going to be pretty much fine. And lastly, he mentions that for staying long term, over 6 months, he's gonna find Margarita boring, even if he stays in Pampatar. And it's a nice place to go for vacations, but his particular take is doesn't want to go, spend most of his time of the year over there. And that, of course, that's his particular take, and good for him. However, that's not the case for many millions of people, actually, throughout the decades history. First, we have a bunch of people from the mainland Venezuela that moves to Margarita Island. They're pretty much, they live over there, they don't want to get out. Even myself, I thought a couple of times of moving full-time to Margarita Island. The second thing, many Westerns, especially Europeans, from Italy, France, Belgium, I met Belgian guys, Dutch, British, Canadians, many parts of the world. They like to move over there, so they travel all over the world and move over there. I actually put the example of a German lady that she traveled all over the world, found Margarita Island, and she fell in love, and now she's living over there. She has a business over there, and so on. Very good for her. So you have to take that particular opinion with a grain of salt. That's his opinion, and I respect it. However, you have to have your own experience in the island. So if you have, the thing that I can say about Botai Globe's opinion, that I completely respected, and believe me, he's a very smart man, a well-traveled man, is that he has some harsh opinions about the country that I'm not saying that are not accurate, and the appreciation things can go either way. But after reading this, if you've never been in the country, you're a Western, never been in Venezuela, and you're reading this, and you have a remote interest in the country, what I can suggest is that still take the trip, a short trip. It's going to be safe. You already mentioned it as well. I'll mention this a couple of times. You're going to be safe here, and reach your own conclusions. And afterwards, make your own decisions. I want to give a shout out to Botai Club, first for writing this couple of pieces of content, and also for coming to the country. He's a very cool dude, a very smart man. Wish him the best, and I cannot wait to read your comments below.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again, and have a nice day.